Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Muhammad Ali Rabani, and today on the forum of Medicos Academics we are going to discuss FCPS Part 1 questions of embryology. For the purpose of this particular video, we will use MCQs from Medicine and Allied portion of SK Golden 9. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulder of the giants, said by Isaac Newton. So I would like to give my due credit to all the content and illustration, the sources that have made it possible. I don't claim ownership to any of them, and due credit will be given to the best of my ability. So we will discuss embryology in general and special embryology system wise. So we will discuss them question by question. So general embryology. These are the questions related to the cell division and chromosomal abnormalities. At meiosis, one daughter cell receives extra chromosome. This is called, when one daughter cell receives extra chromosome, of course at one pair will have an extra chromosome. It will be trisomy. Trisomy is the correct answer, but here in this MCQ there is another correct answer. This is non-disjunction. This is unequal distribution of chromosome. When the chromosomes are arranged at the equatorial plate, they normally separate from one another equally. That is known as disjunction. But if that failed to occur, it will be non-disjunction. Strictly speaking, this answer is absolutely correct, but I am giving preference to trisomy because they have told about the receiving of extra chromosome. So I am giving preference to trisomy. Acrosomes are formed by these are formed at the head of the sperm, forming the acrosomal cap. They are derived from Golgi apparatus. The important thing to remember is that they have hormones like hyaluronic acid and hyaluronidase and other ones that help in the penetration of zona pellucida and penetration of the sperm to reach the ovum. Bar body is present in, yes, bar body is present in normal female. Here Klinefelter syndrome is also correct, but normal female are of course more in number and are more common as compared to Klinefelter syndrome, so we will prefer the this one, common one. A very easy concept to get is bar body will always be present whenever there are more than one X chromosome. In normal female there are two X chromosome, so one X chromosome will remain functional, the other one will become bar body. Similarly, if there is a Klinefelter syndrome and double XY, the second X chromosome will again become the bar body. And as the Klinefelter syndrome worsens and there are addition of number of X chromosome, let's say a person is triple XY, tetra XY. So when there is triple XY or tetra XY, there will be two bar bodies and three bar bodies respectively. So here we will both of these are correct, Klinefelter and normal female, but we will go for normal female as they are more common and it is average found answer. Aneuploidy. Yes, you should be very familiar with the concept of euploidy and aneuploidy. What is the haploid number of chromosome in humans? It is 23. When it is diploid, it becomes 46. 46 is the number of chromosome in a somatic cell of human being. Whenever the number of chromosome is in the multiple of n, is in the multiple of haploid number. So haploid number, diploid number, triploid number, tetraploid number, pentaploid number, go on. This, if the chromosome number is in the multiple of this is known as euploidy. Euploidy, it is sometimes that triploid fetus is born, it is not viable, it dies very quickly, but sometimes it's born triploidy. There are 69 chromosomes in that. All the other chromosomes abnormalities, when there is one chromosome less, one chromosome more, two chromosome less, two chromosome more, anything that is not the multiple of 13 for a human being, that is not the multiple of haploid number, that is known as aneuploidy. So here both of these answers are correct. Chromosome number more than 46, this is correct. Chromosome number less than 46, this is correct. Even extra chromosome is correct. So the small genetic addition, subtraction, deletion, they will not be counted, but a whole addition or subtraction of the number of chromosome that will deviate it from the table of 13, it will be aneuploidy. Down syndrome chromosome, it is chromosome number 21. I have listed the common syndromes that are asked in the CPSP examination. Down syndrome 21, Edwards syndrome 18, Tau 13, Klinefelter is double X, triple X, and so on. Extra X is with Y. Turner syndrome is single X. Again, you see in Turner syndrome there will be no bar body. Then there is triple X syndrome and tetra X syndrome, so on. So these are frequently asked. You should know them. Down syndrome, they have asked about Turner syndrome, karyotype of again Turner syndrome. In Turner syndrome, she has amenorrhea, absent sexual characteristic, widely spaced nipples, and so on. You will read them. So this is Turner syndrome. Lady with absent pubic hair, widely spaced nipple, again the same question. Turner syndrome. Klinefelter karyotype, double XY. So option A. Trisomy, again the same question at Down syndrome. So try memorize this, they are frequently asked. Moving on to the ovarian cycle and related hormone, corpus luteum secretes. Normally we say that it secretes progesterone, but they have specifically given progesterone only, so that rendered this option incorrect. The correct answer will be this one: progesterone, estrogen, and inhibin. These are all the hormones that are being secreted by the corpus luteum, and sometimes you are asked if which is the hormone that is secreted in the largest amount. That will be progesterone, and that is very important at the early pregnancy, and it helps in the maintenance of placenta. Same question, same answer. A woman present on the 18th day of a menstrual cycle, she will be in which phase? For this purpose you should know the phases of the menstrual cycle. Here the answer would be secretory phase. Okay, the interesting thing is the phases of the ovarian cycle are named differently depending upon what you are seeing. If you are seeing the endometrium, for the first 3 to 5 days it is known as menstrual phase, then as it grows it is known as proliferatory phase, and after the ovulation it is known as secretory phase. But the same thing if we see from the follicular perspective, first 14 days these are known as follicular phase. These are the time where primordial follicle grow all the way up to the Graafian follicle. Then there is a point, not a phase itself, the point of ovulation. After that there is a phase where corpus luteum is present up till its regression, that is known as luteal phase. So here the answer could have been luteal phase or secretory phase, and here you can see that these are options are given mixed. They have given follicular phase at one point, proliferatory phase at other point, and secretory phase at other point, and again ovulatory phase. So you should make yourself familiar with the phases of ovulation, ovulatory cycle, both from the endometrial perspective and the follicular perspective. Okay, one more thing I wanted to say was, yes, the ovulation is usually on the 14th day, but the interesting thing is for day 14 is not so much consistent when you count from the day 1. It can be day 17, day 18 in different people, and can be before day 14 also. But if we look back from the last day, that is pretty much consistent. If a person has a period of 34 days, she is most likely to ovulate on her day 20. If a person has a cycle of 24 days, she is most likely to ovulate on her day 14. So if we look back from that, these 14 days are much more consistent as compared to these 14 days. Yes, I'm not going to explain it very much, but here is a food for your thought. Pause your screen here, try to understand these images. I just told you about follicular ovulation to luteal phase. I told you about the menstrual proliferative secretory phase, and here is their relation with the estrogen, progesterone, and FSH and LH. You can see there is a peak of estrogen just before ovulation, then there is a peak of both the hormones at the mid of secretory phase or luteal phase. And you can see here in the follicular phase FSH is more. At the time of ovulation the peak of LH is much higher as compared to the FSH, and in the luteal phase in general the luteinizing hormone LH is a little more in level. Okay, ovarian cycle hormone level that remain normal during pregnancy. You did not see the growth hormone, and then growth hormone does not depend so much on the ovarian cycle and during the pregnancy, so it will be remain unaffected. The affected one will be FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone. These will be most affected. There are minor affected also. You will be discussed with that in physiology. Mid luteal phase, which hormone is at peak? Mid luteal is the secretory phase, luteal phase, the mid of it, which hormone is at its peak. The estrogen and progesterone, both hormone, they peak at mid of this one. So this is the answer. If you say that which hormone is at the highest level, that will be progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone in third trimester is produced by, yes, in third trimester both of these hormones are being produced by the placenta. In the beginning, the progesterone especially, it is produced in the corpus luteum, but about as we move on to the first trimester into the second trimester, the bulk that is being carried out by the placenta. And this particular information is important because if in the first trimester there is ovary of the female is removed, then corpus luteum is removed with them, and the placenta does not get the support for the progesterone and the pregnancy falls. But if the ovary is removed in the third trimester, the pregnancy stays because the progesterone hormone support to the endometrium and the placenta, it is being produced by the placenta itself. It is self-sufficient in that. Kupffer cells of the liver are derived from. Okay, now we are moving on to the gastrulation and derivatives. Kupffer cells are basically macrophages, and these are derived from mesoderm, like all the blood derivatives. Okay, I am leaving this picture here. This is from the Keith Elmore embryology. You can pause the slide and study it. This is very important for the this is very commonly asked question, that this particular part of the body is derived from which layer: ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm, neural crest, neural tube, and so on. This is the table from BRS. I hope you must have already read that and memorized it, but if you have not done it by yet, I'll suggest you go for it. Okay, Kupffer cell is derived from mesoderm. Remaining question like this I have distributed in the topic which is being discussed. Diaphragm, congenital diaphragmatic hernia, it is due to, okay, it is due to the incomplete pleuroperitoneal membrane. Here is that confusion between the two words, pleuroperitoneal membrane and pleuropericardial membrane. Okay, now let me confuse the things even more. This membrane that forms the larger part of the diaphragm, and that is not formed in the case of hernia, that is the pleuroperitoneal membrane. But to complicate things more, the opening that was present before the membrane, that is known as pleuropericardio-peritoneal canal. So you have to be vigilant about what is the exact nature of the question. If they are asking about the membrane, then be very vigilant to see pleuroperitoneal membrane. But if they asked the diaphragmatic hernia is due to the failure of closure of which canal, then we will say pericardio-peritoneal canal. The membrane is pleuroperitoneal. The actual opening that was later closed, that is known as pericardio-peritoneal. Actually, if you go into the detail, it is because at that time the canal was formed. At that time, the pericardial cavity and pleural cavities are not separate. But by the time the membrane was formed, these cavities were separate, and the membrane was formed actually between the peritoneum and the pleural cavity. Umbilical cord contains two arteries and one vein. Arteries contain partially deoxygenated blood, and vein contain highly oxygenated blood. During the last 7 months, HCG source is HCG throughout the pregnancy. It is produced by the placenta, and to be more specific, it is being produced by the syncytial trophoblast part of the placenta. So this is your answer, and I am leaving this poster here for you to study. I am not reading it. You can pause the screen here. So they have compared the human chorionic growth factor, progesterone, prolactin, and estrogen. These are produced by which gland in pregnancy? You can see HCG is being produced by placenta throughout. Progesterone in the beginning, it is produced by corpus luteum. Estrogen in the beginning, produced by corpus luteum, but you see, like week 10 about that is the end of first trimester, I'm sorry, throughout that second and third trimester, it is being produced by placenta. Same is for these hormones. Relaxin, in the beginning it is produced by corpus luteum, and then it is being produced by placenta. And oxytocin It is being produced by the pituitary gland. Placenta and umbilical cord. Placenta passes through endometrium, does not cross myometrium. So this is the accreta. Normally what happens is placenta is present in the endometrium, but it is not covering whole of the thickness of endometrium. There is a limit, there is a part of endometrium between the placenta and the myometrium. The placenta is not going through and through the endometrium, but if the placenta goes through all the way through the endometrium and touches the myometrium, that is known as placenta accreta. If this invades the muscle layer, that is known as increta. If it passes through the muscle layer all the way to the outside, that is known as percreta. Anatomy of child. Normal characteristics. Which is the normal characteristic of newborn? Upper limb is not fully developed. Vertebra is C-shaped with concave surface. Thorax is cross-sectional, is oval. Liver is small for weight. The correct answer here is vertebra is C-shaped. Like see, you can see in fetus and newborn the vertebra is almost C-shaped. The upper limb is almost fully developed. Anatomically speaking, it is fully developed, but there are Graf's reflex and other reflexes that are yet to develop, and these are not dependent upon the upper limb development, that are basically development of CNS myelination. And lower limb, it is almost fully developed, but there are some things like there is angle of the knees and things like that that have to be adjusted. Then there is thorax. In the thorax, the newborn and the fetus, it has almost circular thorax. As we grow, the adult gets the transverse diameter more than AP diameter. And the liver, in the fetus, the liver is large for weight as compared to the adult, and that is why when a newborn, you can see the newborn have protruding belly, and that is because the liver is comparatively larger as compared to the cavity space of the peritoneum. So this is it. Birth defect and teratology. You should read the table that is present in various books in BRS, High Yield, and even Langman. That particular table must be read. And a very common question that is asked is German measles, rubella, and alcohol. These are the common questions that are being asked. So the measles in pregnant lady, it mostly produces cataract. Let's move on to the special histology. Cardiovascular system itself as a whole, it is very important. If you have to do one topic from the special embryology, go for cardiovascular system. And cardiovascular system, you are asked about everything. You are asked about the formation of atria, ventricle, aortic arches, and the anomalies. Here the question is given about the aortic arch. Maxillary artery is derived from first aortic arch. This is the table from Langman embryology, and I am giving it as a reference. But go on, pause the video and revise what you have already learned. Revise all the arches. Again, there is pulmonary circulation throughout, very important. Blood bypasses from pulmonary trunk to aorta. So in here in the pulmonary circulation, it goes through, that is ductus arteriosus, truncus arteriosus. Round ligament of liver, what it is remnant of? Round ligament of liver, it is basically this one, the ligament of teres hepatis. It is the remnant of umbilical vein, and given that, you must revise all the other remnants. Medial umbilical ligament is the remnant of umbilical arteries, and this ligamentum venosum, ductus venosus, this foramen ovale, this becomes fossa ovalis in adults. Here it becomes fossa ovalis, and you should go ahead and read for septum primum, septum secundum. Septum primum forms the floor of fossa ovalis, septum secundum forms the limbus of fossa ovalis, and then there is ductus arteriosus, it becomes ligament arteriosum in adult, and so on. Transposition of great vessels most commonly. In transposition of great vessels, the great arteries, they switch their chambers. Normally what happens is the left ventricle, it gives rise to aorta, the left ventricle, it gives rise to pulmonary artery, but if we switch them, then it becomes the transposition of great vessels. So aorta rises from the right side. You see, the aorta is rising from the right side, so it becomes the two closed circuits are formed, from like the blood from the whole of the deoxygenated blood of the body, it reaches the right atrium, and then again the same deoxygenated blood, it is pumped into the aorta, and the same goes for the pulmonary circuit. The blood continue to flow in closed lobe. There is usually some type of communicating defect like patent ductus arteriosus or ventricular or atrial septal defect that actually makes it possible for a person to live for some time. Cardiovascular system, highest oxygenation saturation is. For pulmonary circulation, you can simply say that per umbilical vein, because after oxygenation, umbilical vein is carrying the blood to the body, so it has not been utilized yet, so that will contain the highest level. But for future references, I am giving the stats like which comparison in which vessel will contain which percentage of blood. You don't actually have to revise, you memorize all of this, but you must get an idea about the gradient, like which has the higher concentration than the other. Parenchyma cells of the liver are derived from. Okay, in the book the answer was given as ectoderm, but I will humbly negate this answer and say that correct answer is endoderm, because the liver parenchyma, you should know the difference between the word parenchyma and the stroma. Parenchyma are the actual functional cells of any organ. In this case we are talking about liver, and stroma are the ones that are forming the capsule, the septa and all the supporting structures. So you can see the liver has parenchyma is being produced by the outbudding from the GI tract. We all know that GI tract is formed of endoderm, so the parenchyma of liver is derived from the endoderm. Yes, the stroma, it is derived from septum transversum, that will be mesoderm in origin, but ectoderm, no way. Transitional epithelium of the bladder, it is derived from, yes, it is derived from endoderm. Yes, it is allantois, it will be formed allantois, it will form the bladder in later life, and allantois has been pinched off from hind this allantois has been pinched off from the yolk sac and hindgut. So endoderm will be correct answer. Yes, there is a debate about this answer to be correct. That's a little technical to be answered. What happens is that this mesonephric duct it gets absorbed into the bladder in later life, and it gives rise to the area of trigone. So embryologically speaking, yes, the area of trigone, it is derived from the mesoderm, but a lot of books including the BRS and Langman, they categorically say that this part of the bladder, although it is immediately formed by the mesoderm by the absorption of the mesonephric duct, but the epithelium covering them is later replaced by the endoderm. So I think the best answer would be to go for endoderm. Median umbilical ligament is the remnant of urachus. So this connection of the allantois to the umbilical cord or umbilical ring, this obliterates later on, and this forms a ligament that is known as urachus. And here you can also see that there are two connections in the umbilicus that are at the remnants in the adults. One is this Wittlein duct. Sometimes this Wittlein duct becomes patent and it becomes the fecal fistula comes out, and when there is a urine coming out of umbilicus, it is mostly because of this remnant urachus. It did not obliterate in that patient, and urine is obliterated. Germ cells appear in yolk sac. In yolk sac they appear in third week. Surprisingly, this is a very frequently asked question. And germ cells appear in the yolk sac wall in the third week. Later on in the fourth week they migrate all the way into the mesentery, go all the way back to the posterior abdominal wall, and they reach near the forming gonads in the fifth week, and in the sixth week they actually invade the ridges, and after that the gonads they start their differential development. Before the week 5, both of the gonads, even microscopically, they were similar in both males and females. Nervous system, myelination of the nerve fiber, that starts in 4th month. I am giving the reference of BRS embryology here. Vertebral defects in neural tissue. If there is a defect where there is vertebra is defected but neural tissue is also within it, that will be meningomyelocele. Only vertebra, that will be spina bifida occulta. Only vertebra plus meninges, spina bifida, meningocele. Meninges plus spinal cord, meningomyelocele. And if the spinal cord is naked and it is not covered by meninges or skin, that is known as meningoschisis or rachis. Vertebral defect with neural tissue, same question, same answer. Thank you so much. By it we reached the end of it. Please follow our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos. and if you have any question, feel free to ask in comments. Thank you so much. See you soon, inshallah.